Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. Taylor Rockwell is not with me today. He'll be back in studio with me tomorrow. Today, I'll be talking to Neil Blackmon of YanksAreComing.com. If you don't read YanksAreComing.com in the week before a US men's national team game, you're doing it wrong. You should read YanksAreComing.com. They have great in-depth previews. So on today's show, I'll be talking to Neil about the upcoming USA v Panama game. We're going to get kind of detailed about what Panama do, who the players to watch are, how the US can combat that. We'll also talk about the roster, the selections, the non-selection of Fabian Johnson, the selection of Benny Feilhaber, and kind of what we're looking for from certain US players. For the first part of the show, maybe the first 10-15 minutes, we talk about the NASL lawsuit against US Soccer. This is because Neil has a legal background, so I thought I couldn't let the opportunity go to talk to Neil about that. I would recommend listening to it because I think there's some really good information in there. But if you want to skip that and get straight to the US national team World Cup qualifier stuff, then you want to hit about 16 minutes into this podcast. Neil Blackmon, welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. And according to our DMs, you are now full of energy drink. Is that correct?
I am. I was able to grab a Red Bull to get excited for this. Not a Red Bull Arena to get excited for this conversation.
I wasn't going to name the brand, but I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did. So yeah, I wanted to have you on. We want to talk about Panama, United States. I want to talk a little bit NASL as well. But first, I want to talk about your website, YanksAreComing.com. I realised looking at it today, because you know what, I visit it always before US men's national team games, because I feel like you guys do great tactical previews. But I realised you predate the Total Soccer Show by a year. It says you've been going since 2008. 10 years. Almost.
Yeah, almost.
I'm really interested in sort of the idea of, my understanding is you're not a full-time soccer writer. You're an attorney, right? I'm assuming that makes more money than soccer writing. But you seem to put like a close to full-time amount of time into your soccer media, right? Podcasts and website and all that sort of stuff. So I'm sort of wondering how you strike that balance.
I don't sleep as much as I should, I guess.
Hence the Red Bull?
Yeah, hence the Red Bull. And I think like you all, I mean, if you're passionate about something, it's a little easier.
Yeah.
There's a joy in it. And as far as that goes, I mean, an aside is the website is born of Michael Orozco got a red card in the Olympics in 2008, and I got so upset because I thought that Olympic team was very good and might medal. And I got so upset that I just said, I'm going to start a blog. And I put it up on Blogspot, and it was the most rudimentary thing that you'd ever seen. But within a year, like, the comment sections were pretty full back when those were a big thing. Yeah, because
people were looking for content around that time, and it wasn't necessarily in the mainstream, right? So you needed to find somewhere.
Yeah, and so that's kind of, it just was born of that and grew from there. And now, I'm headed to Orlando tonight, and this will be the 7th, and then in Trinidad will be the 8th of the Hex qualifying matches that I've attended. So, I mean, it's a pretty important, the journalism aspect of it has become more important to me, and we've just been really lucky that people still think that we have something valuable to say.
I mean, I especially do, because it's so rare to find well-researched previews that really take the opposition into account. Like a lot of websites will be like, well, here's what I think the US should do, but none of that seems to apply to what the opposition team is doing. I think you guys do a great job of sort of figuring out what Panama might do, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I checked this morning, the preview is not up yet at time of recording, so I'm hoping we can kind of get a preview of your preview today.
Of course.
But first, I want to lean on your legal background and touch on the NASL lawsuit with US Soccer. Do you mind sort of if I divert us into that for a couple of minutes?
No, that'd be great.
So I interviewed Nipun Chopra recently, and we talked about it at length, but we didn't really look at sort of the value of the NASL lawsuit and what the chances of it being successful are. So I wonder if you could give us a sort of a brief analysis of that.
So the argument is basically a market favoritism argument which for antitrust lawyers, not antitrust lawyers, rather, NASL basically alleges that U.S. Soccer and then 3 conspirators. The word conspiracy appears in the complaint 31 times.
Yeah.
And they say that some, which is the kind of marketing branch of Major League Soccer.
Soccer
USL,
United Marketing, right?
Right. And then the United Soccer League and MLS have conspired with the U.S. Soccer Federation to prevent NASL from becoming a Division I league. And what they seek is a preliminary injunction that blocks the U.S. Soccer Federation from doing that. They just want a court order that says, hey, you can't tell them that they're not Division II anymore.
And does that apply just specifically to NASL, or is it that they are seeking to block U.S. Soccer from assigning any divisions at all in the United States?
That's a secondary claim for relief that they seek, is that they say, like, any divisional sanctioning is bad.
I see.
But as a preliminary argument, they want a court to prevent U.S. Soccer from stripping them of D2 status. And so it's definitely 2 different claims. There's a law called the Sherman Act, which kind of governs all of antitrust law. That's the conspiracy argument. And that argument is that USF, or the U.S. Soccer Federation, has conspired in a way that hurts competition in the marketplace for soccer in the United States. And in order to win on that argument, they'd have to convince a court of a couple things. First, they'd have to convince them that the depiction of competition, what is the market for soccer in the United States? And what I mean by that is, is it MLS, NASL, and USL, or is American soccer kind of a unique market given what we see on television that incorporates other things like the Premier League and the Bundesliga and Liga MX? So I think a big hurdle for them in terms of the conspiracy arguments is they might lose on the argument that U.S. Soccer doesn't control the market, right? Like, U.S. Soccer influences it, but they're just one piece of that cog. NASL doesn't seem to, really care about that as much. They spend a lot of time in the complaint trying to say, hey, here's what a Division I soccer team looks like, and here's what a Division II soccer team looks like, and you and these other branches, Soccer United Marketing, USL, have all kind of used their influence to prevent the North American Soccer League from advancing. And so I think, that's interesting. The preliminary injunction argument, I think, is a little more, it's a little better, because I think NASL could potentially prove that U.S. Soccer is harming competition if they could show, if they could win those market arguments. In other words, if they can win the argument that U.S. Soccer controls what the relevant market for soccer is, then they could probably argue that any rules that U.S. Soccer passes that limit competition are bad, such as the specific things that they challenge are like market limitations and population number limitations on who could have a Division I team. Those ownership caps.
I saw that there's a certain size of metro area, and I think owners had to have a certain amount of money in the bank, which I always thought it makes sense, but it's also weird at the same time.
Correct. And so there's a law called the Rule of Reason in antitrust law. It's it's literally
Sounds
2/3 of, it's 2/3 of your law school class on antitrust. And basically that says that a law that affects competition, it can't harm competition more than it helps it, right?
I see.
The Rule of Reason, it's really simple. And so what NASL would have to prove is that U.S. Soccer's rules harm competition more than they help them. So with that in mind, I would imagine that U.S. Soccer will argue, hey, we need rules to organize men's soccer in ways that are economically beneficial. And I imagine that they will then point to other structures across the world and say, hey, even though those have promotion and relegation, the reason they're set up that way is to foster competition and economically, have healthy markets. And that's where NASL's kind of in this weird spot, because when you argue that all divisions are bad, when any divisional sanctioning is a problem, you're breaking away from that traditional pro-rel argument, right?
Yeah.
And instead, you're almost arguing the opposite of what they're arguing in the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which is what's so weird about it. Essentially, you're just saying, hey, there's a conspiracy and the NASL is getting held down. They also have a monopoly argument, and we can get into what that argument is if you want, but essentially that one's a little more simplistic in the sense that basically their argument is MLS has a monopoly in the U.S. and Canada. Again, I think that argument has big problems in terms of market. And I also think it has issues in terms of, do MLS and United Soccer League, for that matter, because they've alleged them as a co-conspirator, do their market positions sort of reflect, market economic business choices, like we're going to go to Richmond or we're going to go to Cincinnati? Or do they reflect, a benefit from U.S. soccer sort of establishing rules that favor them?
I see.
I think, and Kartik Krishnaiyer at World Soccer Talk wrote a really good piece about it. Like, the monopoly arguments are more problematic to me just because NASL's made so many bad choices. Just so many business.
I'd argue they weren't forced into making those bad choices. They just made bad choices.
Correct, and they, and especially in terms of like what markets to try to penetrate, and then some of the rules that they challenged, at least two of the specific rules that they challenged, they were at the table to negotiate for those rules. Now, a couple of those owners have since left for USL, but that doesn't change the fact that at the time the rules were negotiated, those were NASL, ownership members that were like, this seems like a good rule.
Right. Oh, so my other question is, when do we find out? Because obviously we can talk about it endlessly, but what really matters is what happens in court, right? So when does this all go down?
So it's going to be a while. The biggest reason for that is the ruling on the preliminary injunction, I think, will be faster. Like, I would imagine...
It's got to be before next season, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly U.S. Soccer could wait to try to strip the status till January and kind of let what markets NASL claims it's developing play out. But, yeah, that would have to be before next season. In terms of the litigation as a whole, NASL hired Jeff Kessler. He represented Tom Brady against the NFL. He's representing the Cowboys running back, Ezekiel Elliott, and his grievances. He's very familiar with pro soccer matters as well. He's a consultant on Frazier versus MLS, I think, which was the last big antitrust case.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Yeah. And he's just a really prominent sports attorney. He was one of the lawyers for the U.S. women's national team players in their wage discrimination matter. So, point being, when you hire him, his presence in the lawsuit, it's a powerful kind of statement that NASL doesn't intend to. This isn't just symbolic.
Right. It means they're going to the mattresses, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what it means. And so what we have now is we have a judge named Margot Brody that has the case. She was appointed by Obama. I mention that because that kind of could control, like, she's less likely to be persuaded by pure economic arguments about market size. Like, she may be influenced by the idea that the market for U.S. soccer also involves European and Mexican elements. Whereas a more conservative jurist might say, look, market is what it is. It's MLS.
I see.
That's just my opinion about that. And I think...
I've got to say, as a sidebar, I find all of that stuff mind-boggling, how sort of which of the two parties appointed you means that you're going to have a certain worldview. I understand that that's how it is, but I find it really hard to wrap my head around living here in the United States that is always an issue.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. She hasn't responded to... Jeff Kessler wrote a letter saying, look, by October 20th, NASL will have suffered irreparable harm in terms of the preliminary injunction. So, like I said, two forms of relief. A preliminary injunction, don't take away our D2, and then a permanent injunction, all divisions are bad. The second one will take longer, but the preliminary injunction, Kessler asserts we need an answer before the end of October. Thus far, Judge Brody, hasn't answered that. But I would imagine that eventually there would be some sort of ruling on that, just because there's, like you said, there's next season, but even preliminary to that, there's renewing sponsorship, there's renewing season tickets, there's leases of stadiums.
And there's the expansion teams, right? They may not want to get involved with a league that doesn't have a divisional status.
Oh, especially that. So, yeah, I mean, you have a lot of factors that actually NASL's argument that they'd be economically damaged is pretty accurate. She knows that. So I would expect that process to play itself out before the end of the new year, and then the other process would be a much longer game.
Okay, so that's obviously something US Soccer will be keeping an eye on, and I imagine even if they're confident, they'll be slightly worried about it because it's kind of hovering over them. But they have a more immediate problem, and that problem is qualifying for the World Cup. So this Friday, the US plays Panama, and then on Tuesday they go away to Trinidad, as you mentioned. I've got you on here, Neil, because the reason I originally wanted to talk to you was to preview that Panama game. So I guess the first thing I want to talk about is Fabian Johnson, because that's the big talking point. We did a podcast together last week, which I believe is publishing very soon, where we talked at length about Fabian Johnson and how he was kind of problematic to fit into the US team, because he's not really a left back, and if you play him on the left wing, then that's Darlington Nagbe's spot, and if you play him on the right wing, then he's out of position. And it seems to me that maybe Bruce Arena has solved that problem by just not picking him.
I agree. No, I mean, I think that's right, and I think there's an argument that. Let me first say, I would have included him.
Oh, you would? Okay. I did see you tweet that.
And I would have included him just because, and I think I tweeted it with reservations, like, hey, he's out of form for club and country. I watched him play. I heard you all's roster reaction, and I agreed. Like, I thought his performance this past weekend was poor.
Yeah, you watched it too.
I thought it was even worse against Dortmund, although it's hard sometimes when you lose 6-1 to, like, identify one player and be like, he's the reason they lost 6-1. But he certainly forgot to mark on the goal this weekend. And, it's just little things like that maybe he hasn't adjusted to the speed and tempo of the Bundesliga yet.
You mean after coming back from his injury?
Right, after coming back. And so I think that there's some maybe form and fitness issues. What's odd is they were more pronounced in September, but he was there. I'm not particularly persuaded by the idea that he's a scapegoat for what happened a month ago.
Right.
Nor am I persuaded, like you all, I'm not particularly persuaded by this idea that Arena has any particular disdain for German-American players.
Yeah, because on paper it looks like a purge, doesn't it? But I think that's mostly like John Brooks is injured and Jermaine Jones isn't fully fit or in form, and then there's this Fabian Johnson thing, and it all adds up to look like something, but it really isn't anything.
Right, and Timmy Chandler has never played good for the national team. So.
Right, yeah, that's a long-running problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's not anything new. So, I still would have included him, though, in a world where you're saying, let's bring Giassi's artist.
Yeah, true.
And I get it. People are, Giassi is okay, and he takes on players, and he'll give you a lot of effort. And I'll just choose a technically gifted player like Johnson almost any time over that. And I understand if people have disagreements, like, that's fair. Now, that said...
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, that said, I don't know how, like, what role would he have played? Because it's pretty clear from what Johnson has said that it's hard for him to transition to playing fullback in 1 or 2 days. And that's kind of always been his position, even before the "I only want to come for the big games" comments. Was, you know, I know he did an interview with us and an interview with Haller where he basically provided the same quote, which was, "When I come into a camp for a day and a half and you've been playing as a high wing, it's difficult tactically to mentally adjust to playing fullback."
Yeah.
Not that I'm not happy to do it. And I think the other thing I want to say, and I want to know kind of where you're at on it positionally, but the other thing I want to say is, as leverage against this idea that there's a commitment issue with Fabian, I would point out that in a year where he was one of the top 10 chance creators in the Bundesliga, he was playing fullback for his national team. You don't do that if you have commitment issues. I just don't think you do.
Yeah, so I remember as well, I never remember a time when he sort of refused to call up and claimed an injury that he didn't have or anything like that. He's always turned up and played. And, yeah, like you said, he's played fullback when maybe that wasn't his favourite position. The only thing I can remember is the incident in the, what do we call it, the CONCACAF Cup, the weird playoff cup against Mexico, where Klinsmann was annoyed with him for claiming a calf injury that he wasn't convinced was there. And I kind of blamed Klinsmann for that more than anyone, because I think if a player says, like, my leg's about to go, then you should listen to him because he knows his legs.
Right. No, for sure. And he warns him about it before a game that was played in 100-degree temperatures, which he's also consistently complained about hot weather.
Yeah. Oh, is it? Hector Cumming has the Fabian Johnson heat index, misery heat index.
So they asked him what he thought about CONCACAF qualifying in his first cycle with the national team, and he said, you know, it's an honor to play for my country, blah, 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 blah. It's so hot. Essentially, like, it's just so brutally hot, you know. And he wants to play in sweater weather.
So the other sort of surprise inclusion on this roster to me is Benny Fairhaber, because even in Benny Fairhaber's own words, he said, "I didn't expect this. I thought this was over, and yet here I am." So I wondered. I don't think we've ever talked about Benny, so I wondered what your take on Benny Fairhaber was.
He's the guy that gets open, right?
Yeah.
You know, he gets open. He's wonderful at finding spaces and demanding the ball, which the U.S. doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. And I also feel like, here's what I thought about it. First, I would have called question instead of him. And Benny, I know you're a Total Soccer Show listener.
Oh, is he?
So, definitely.
Oh, I didn't know that.
You guys are among his faves. But if you're listening, Benny, it's not because I don't think you should have gotten an opportunity with the national team. All right. It's just that I think Sacha Kljestan is in better form. I think that what Sacha's done in MLS the last 2 years is remarkable. And I think that it was obvious that he had some sort of chemistry with Pulisic when Klinsmann called him in right before in the last match that they won, prior to starting X in such disastrous fashion. So that's who I would have called to kind of play the role I would imagine that they want Fairhaber to play, which is when Panama bunkers and when Panama sits real deep. You have to find someone who does two things, I think. You have to have someone who, can get open and receive the ball, and then you have to have somebody that, either when they keep possession, and then they know the, fine line between when it's time to just try to keep the ball and when it's time to try those seam-busting passes that we've come to love from Fairhaber. And, I think that's kind of what he offers.
So my weird confusion is when Bruce Arena took over, Sacha Kljestan and Benny Fairhaber were both included in the first. It was the January camp, right? But then the two friendlies.
Right.
And I really thought, okay, these guys have been left out in the cold by Klinsmann. Now Arena's back. He loves both these players. I mean, I know he loves Kljestan, right? Because he tried to sign him for the LA Galaxy back in the day and was threw a tantrum when MLS sort of wouldn't let him do it. So I just expected them to be a part of the US national team going forward. And then suddenly they're not. And then suddenly we have issues we have issues with people getting open and moving the ball through midfield, and they always seemed like these are two guys that should have been part of this roster to help make things happen. And I've never, ever heard an explanation from Bruce Arena as to why that was not the case.
I haven't either, and if I get called on, which is, sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't at the U.S. press conferences. It just depends on the mood that Mike Kemmerman's in. But
right. Where his finger points.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a question that's worth asking. What's weird to me about Kleshton is that he was back involved, right? Like, he was kind of instrumental in the U.S. even getting to the Hex.
Right.
He had a huge game in Jacksonville a year ago against Trinidad and Tobago, and then he got the call into the January camp, and you're like, okay, Clemson finally called him back in. He performed. Then he comes in January, and you're right, Arena has always seemed to like him, and then all of a sudden he's out of the picture when the U.S. seems to need someone with that type of skill set. The one thing that I think maybe makes it Benny and not Sasha is, do you think that, like, the tempo of MLS is different than international, and maybe, like, Kleshton is just a step or half a step behind tempo-wise in international games, and that's less of a concern with Feilhaber?
That's very possible, yeah, because I would say Benny Feilhaber seems a lot, well, not a lot, but he seems smoother in a way, yeah, and like more composed, whereas I think Kleshton kind of likes to almost force the through ball, and it doesn't always come off. And I think maybe you get a lot of assists that way, right? If you keep looking for the through ball and the chip over the top ball for Bradley Wright Phillips.
Yeah.
But if I know Bruce Arena values possession very highly, so if you're really forcing it at international level, then that means those balls are just hitting Roman Torres and Felipe Valoy quite a lot and coming back the other way.
Right. No, and yes, and I also think that Feilhaber has a little more giddy up in terms of
giddy up. I like that phrase.
If you are gonna force and press a little bit, you don't, especially when you're playing against somebody like Gabriel Torres, you don't want to get and Edgar Barcenas, you don't want to get caught out and then not be able to turn around on a swivel and chase.
Right.
And I think that your comment about understanding possession and kind of when to play that ball, like the U.S. has somebody who at least, I think they're very different players, but Kellen Acosta in terms of the going for the big ball is a lot like Kleshton in that regard.
Right.
Whereas, Feilhaber a lot of times is comfortable to just kind of stand there, play the ball very calmly out to the side, and keep possession, and that's fine. But he also, if he goes for the big ball and, it's handled by Panama, when they break, he offers a little bit more in terms of, I'm going to get back right away, and he might be in better positions to do so.
I've seen praise for Feilhaber this year under Peter Vermees that maybe the defensive side of his game has picked up a little bit. I can't say I've watched closely enough to agree or disagree. Have you seen either way on that?
I think it has. I think it's happened. It's been a pretty gradual process over the last couple of years, and I think Peter Vermees deserves a lot of credit for that. I think Bob Bradley probably would have liked to play Feilhaber a lot more, right? But that was always the concern, was that it's kind of somebody that's not necessarily invested defensively.
Right.
Because no one wants to defend, right? You just kind of have to have to suffer defending, and Feilhaber never wanted to.
I mean, I like defending, but that's because I can't play make.
Oh, it's because you have a Midlands accent, I think.
It's a naturally defensive accent. A region of centre-backs. Hey, it's Daryl here with a quick ad break. Today's show is sponsored by Blue Apron. Blue Apron is the #1 fresh ingredient and recipe delivery service in the country. Their mission is to make incredible home cooking accessible to everybody. Here's how it works. You sign up for Blue Apron. A box comes to your house. The box is full of food, but not just any food. It's food that fits the recipe cards that are inside, the exact ingredients that you need, and the step-by-step instructions to make those meals. It would be like if you had a national team and every player was perfect for their position and you had specific instructions for how to make that team work, how to make that team qualify for the World Cup. The upcoming meals at Blue Apron are cheesy chicken and black bean enchiladas with salsa verde, shrimp marinara with spaghetti, spinach and parsley, maple gravy smothered pork chops with stewed collard greens and sweet potatoes, and spiced cauliflower and pepper with jasmine rice and cilantro yogurt sauce. The fourth one would be for me, I believe. I can promise you from personal experience that when you get the recipe card and you have the ingredients, it all makes sense and it's all very, very easy to do, even for people like me, even for Taylor. Taylor says he has difficulty following a recipe sometimes, but when he knows he's got the exact ingredients, it gives you the confidence to know, yes, I can put this meal together. If you'd like to check out this week's menu and get $30 off your first meal plus free shipping, go to blueapron.com/TSS. You'll love how good it feels and tastes to create incredible home-cooked meals with Blue Apron. So don't wait. That's blueapron.com/TSS. Blue Apron, a better way to cook. Well, can we switch to Panama to talk about sort of what we think Panama are going to do and who we need to be aware of? You've mentioned a couple names already. But I guess let's start from the sort of the very big overview. Panama are 1 point ahead of the United States.
They are.
And the US basically needs to win to jump over them into third place, at least temporarily, because there's another game to go after this. My expectation is that Panama would be very happy with a draw here. Does that play out to you? Well, then their next game is home to Costa Rica. So,
right.
What do you think? What do you think their approach is going to be?
I think it's going to be to play for a point.
Okay.
And there are two things that I've identified watching. I've watched their last two games now. The Deli Valdez brothers, who coached before Hernan Gomez, their system was a little more controlled chaos, we used to call it at TYAC, because it was like they pressure in odd places, and then they kind of break frenetically with no real rhyme or reason under the Deli Valdez brothers. Like it wasn't like, hey, they try to usher the ball to the wings all the time and break. Like it was, there wasn't much of a rhyme or reason to it, and the heat maps kind of reflected that. But that chaos was almost a ladder to the World Cup, right?
Yeah.
See what I did there?
I do.
The under Dario Gomez, it's much more controlled in terms of when they break, they want to get the ball to the wing and then try to play balls through to Torres, who tries to bust seams through the middle.
So my understanding is Torres is super fast, so they can hit that pretty quickly.
Yeah, he's crazy fast and a lot stronger than when I saw him at the Gold Cup. I was surprised. He's strong. Like there were, I forget who they were playing that was in that group from Central America. Who was it?
I can't remember.
Okay, well, was it Guatemala? Maybe Nicaragua. One of those two. The point being, he could physically body up people. And with a defender on his shoulder, like it wasn't a big deal. He'd just kind of run through them. So he's really good. The big distinction with what they do tactically when they play away from home and when they play at home is shape. I think you can almost expect it to be more of a 4-5-1 or a really, really deep, two walls of four, almost like a 4-4-2 where they're content with the fact that the two forwards are separated from the midfield by a good distance. And then they would rely
bucket type shape.
Yeah, and then they would rely on Torres to kind of drop real deep and come and get the ball, with the other forward staying very high. And I think that would be either Blas Perez or Abdiel Arroyo, or maybe even, well, no, I think it would be Abdiel Arroyo or Blas Perez.
All right. I know Tejada is the other name on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I guess traditionally they've used him off the bench.
Yeah.
The other thing they might do if it's hot, which it could be, the weather's been kind of all over the place.
Yeah, it's Orlando in October, I guess, yeah.
Right, I mean, it's expected to be pretty warm, but not as hot as it could be. it could be more of like a 4-1-4-1 that plays like a 4-5-1, I guess.
I see.
And in that instance, I would imagine Torres would be the lone guy up top. And then you could imagine that Blas Perez comes in around like the 70th minute.
Yeah.
Because he's been an American, it hasn't been like Carlos Ruiz bad, but it's been close.
Yeah, I mean, I tense up when he comes on, put it that way.
Yeah. He's caused a lot of headaches over the year. But the main thing is, for their shape, look where their wingers are.
Right.
That's what I would say. Like the effect, it's Quintero on one side, and then Edgar Barcenas on the other side. I think both of those guys are pretty talented.
Yeah, me too. I would expect Quintero on the left and Barcenas on the right.
Correct. And Quintero is more of like an in-cutter.
Mm-hmm.
And Barcenas is more of like, I'm going to blow by you.
How do you feel about Villafaña and Yedlin up against those two guys then?
Villafaña just 1v1 defensively concerns me.
Yeah, that seems to be the knock against him.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just 1v1 defending is troublesome. What I will say is, and it's a point that you made in our prior conversation, to briefly reference that, would be that I think that he does have the speed to kind of recover. And then after I saw what DeAndre Yedlin did against Liverpool this weekend, I'm less worried about him against Quintero.
Yeah. If he can stop Sadio Mane and Mohamed Salah, then maybe he can handle Quintero.
Can we send a TYAC Total Soccer Show Christmas holiday card to Rafa Benitez?
Yes, by all means.
That's a remarkable transformation defensively. But I think Quintero is the better player. And, the thing about the in-cutting is, like, Godoy plays over there and is pretty smart. So
Godoy would be like the left centre mid, kind of.
Yeah, they have a pretty good understanding of one another, and the U.S. will need to be careful in terms of, like, if they shade too much to try to help on Quintero, when he in-cuts, it should open up a lot of space, and you don't want Godoy to operate in too much space.
Yeah. So let's move to the midfield, the central midfield. I expect it to be Godoy, as you mentioned, probably Armando Cooper, who I keep thinking of as a winger, but then I keep seeing him play central midfield, so I guess I just kind of have my conception wrong. And the older head, the more defensive guy would probably be Gabriel Gomez. Does that feel about right to you?
Yeah, I think that's what it'll be.
And what's the best way for the US to go up against that? Is it to sort of, for example, my feeling would be to not go with just Bradley sitting deep and then an attacking midfielder ahead of him. I would want at least two central midfielders with then an attacking midfielder ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this might actually be the game to. Well, I think they have two options. I think they could go three in the back, and 3-5-2 if they want to make sure that Altidore has his partner.
Yeah.
And given the likelihood, and I also think Villafaña and Yedlin are really well suited for that, right? And it also kind of allows you to do some damage control depending on how Matt Beasler's eye is.
He has the gash, right? He has the gash above his eye.
Yeah, right. Like I don't think three in the back is good for Omar because it just limits the ambulatory movement that he has to make. And, just stand here and win the ball in the air. Mm-hmm. The issue there, of course, is Omar's tendency to be in horrible positions in the offside trap. But
I can't get started with that today because this podcast would last an extra 20 minutes.
I don't know if the 3-5-2 kind of limits that worry or magnifies it. I couldn't say because we haven't seen enough of it. I almost think that that's what the U.S. will do, but if it's a four-man back line, then maybe, to get that extra help and break down that midfield, I feel like you kind of have to maybe play Bobby Wood alone, which just doesn't seem like something that Arena would do. So what you probably get is Altidore alone, and then you just pray that he decides to pressure the center backs and stay high.
I mean, I could handle Altidore alone, Pulisic behind him, and then two central midfielders, provided Pulisic is occasionally going to come back and help. And if it's like Bradley and Acosta maybe, or Bradley and Bedoya, I think I'm good with that to start. And then Benny Farber coming off the bench maybe for one of the more attacking two.
I think it needs to be Bradley and Bedoya, by the way.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if we mentioned this on the Monday show. I've talked about this roster a lot lately, and I think my feeling was that Acosta wasn't fully back from fitness based on the 30 minutes we saw for Dallas against Orlando, and that maybe it has to be Bedoya, not least because I think he's just sort of better defensively, better at getting open for the ball. Just like, to me, at least right now, he's a step ahead of Kellyn Acosta for a big game.
I agree. Yeah, he's in better form. I thought he was marvelous this weekend. I watched an hour of that. And, I thought Acosta struggled just like the rest of his team.
Yeah.
There was one sort of instructive moment this weekend where Acosta made a bad pass and he kind of lollygagged back to pursue it. And the camera panned over to Pareja, and it wasn't pretty.
Oh, wow. So is there something going on there that we talked a couple of weeks ago, not you and I, but we talked on the show about maybe there's a thing with Dallas where some of the players wanted away at some point in the season. And I know Acosta during the summer was talking about a move to Europe. And when you think of Acosta's game, you don't think of someone who lollygags and doesn't chase after a ball. So is there a sort of an unhappiness sort of situation going on there that's affecting his form?
I don't know. I think he needs to go, though.
Yeah.
I think it would help.
New challenge.
It would just help I mean, his game has some weaknesses still, and he needs to figure those out. The biggest thing in international play, I think I referenced earlier, is that he just Darlington Nagbe has this problem too a little bit, and kind of gets away with it because he's so technically brilliant. It's just understanding that in international soccer you can't just go for goal every time. There's value in holding and keeping the ball. And I think Acosta tries to play these seam busters and go for the big pass so often, and a lot of times at Dallas it works, right? But, as he's played better international opposition and not sort of CONCACAF body feeders, bottom feeders, that's been a body feeder. What is that?
I don't know. It sounds like a horror movie.
That sounds terrible. I think it's been harder for him. And Nagbe, I brought up Nagbe because I think this is a big game for Darlington Nagbe. And I'm going to isolate that in the player to watch section of the TYAC preview, right?
Really?
I feel like this is the game where he needs to show that for all this talent and skill and technique, he can produce against a quality team.
Yeah, when it really matters as well, and when your sort of competition for your left wing spot has literally been left off the roster for you to own it. So it's all the stage is set for Nagbe to sort of walk up and give his soliloquy, right?
It is, and I'm looking forward to hearing you and Taylor's thoughts on it more at length, because to me, the Costa Rica game was telling. That was a game where the better the teams of the U.S. have played, the more Nagbe has struggled.
Yeah.
So, is that step up, is that next level up difficult for him, or is it just a learning curve? I'm inclined, because of his talent and because I really like the guy as a player, to think it's the latter and the breakthrough is coming.
Well, I'm interested in what you said about him always trying to go for goal too much, because I think of Nagbe as someone who plays the sensible pass all the time. So what is it that you're seeing that suggests he's been a bit profligate with possession?
No, it's not that I think that Acosta is the one who is a little bit more.
I see.
With Nagbe, sometimes it's a tempo thing, which is more about. You're right. He will play the ball and keep the ball, and I think he's the best carrier of the ball from the back that we've had maybe since Cherundolo, right? He's willing to go get the ball and carry it out of the back in traffic, and because he gets chopped and hacked at so much in MLS, I think he's perfectly comfortable doing that. I'd like to see him be more aggressive.
Okay.
Like, I think his problem is, I should have lumped him in with Nagbe with Acosta, other than to say, I think both have struggled against higher levels of competition, because it's sort of like understanding how to apply what you do well against better teams.
I see.
And I think with Nagbe, to some extent, it's like, yeah, you're out there to keep the ball, but I'd like you to be, more aggressive. What was the game? He had a game like a month ago where, I saw him, and it won't help to even reference it, but he takes a pass and he kind of does a step back, the defender falls down, and he scores.
Oh, is this where he scored, like, kind of from distance?
Yeah.
He just kind of turned and hit it. Yeah, I can't remember who it was against, but I can picture the goal right now. I believe it got a thumbs up on a Monday Total Soccer Show.
I'm sure it did, and I think Matthew Doyle wrote, like, what was amazing about it was that how decisive he was.
Yeah.
And I guess that's what I'm not articulating this point as well as I would like, and I apologize to the listening audience for that. But I wish he were a little bit more decisive and just a little bit more aggressive internationally. Like, it's okay to take a chance.
I think people share your feelings, but also it is quite hard to explain what's not quite right. But I think you've got it there with the sort of decisiveness of just deciding, all right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take this. Because my feeling of Nagbe a lot of times for the US is he'll take a couple of shots from that, like, top diagonal corner of the box with his right foot from the left side, and they'll sort of just go a little bit over or a little bit wide, and then you'll see him sort of think, okay, I'm going to stop doing that. So it's almost like he's too easily persuaded not to do it by himself, not by anyone else. For
sure, and it's so important, right? Because that the confidence, if he shows that sort of confidence, his teammates will sense that he has it.
Yeah.
Anytime you play with somebody who's playing confidently, like if you're playing with, at least in my experience as a really poor club soccer player, it was, hey, that's another guy we can get the ball, because he believes that he's going to do good things, and traditionally he doesn't put us in bad positions.
Yeah, it's like an NBA Jam, he's on fire thing, right? You just get the ball to him because he's definitely going to do something.
And you have to have secondary. The U.S. Pulisic is probably going to be pretty good. He's probably going to be pretty good in qualifying. He's probably going to be pretty good in Russia. And for me, the U.S. is all about, who's the complementary and secondary playmaker? Who's the guy who peels a defender? Hey, that help defender is thinking, I'm going to go help on Christian Pulisic, and then he, out of the glint of his eye, sees Darlington Nagbe. I don't know if I want to peel over and help on Christian Pulisic.
Right.
And that's what you need, right? That's how you establish that's how you have good attacking soccer.
No, but it is how you start to get defenses to panic, right?
Right.
Can we switch to this Panama defense then? I think I'm expecting a Roman Torres, Felipe Beloy centre-back pairing. Does that seem accurate to you?
That's right, and they're getting older.
They are.
And
Beloy's 36.
Yeah. And I actually think from the video I've watched, Beloy's been better.
Than Torres, or better than previous Beloy?
No, not better. He's definitely not better than previous Beloy. He's a step slower, and he sits a little deeper.
Okay.
And the one thing that happens with Gabriel Gomez, who I would lump in just with those two,
and he's the defensive midfielder for reference.
Right, because Beloy sometimes sits a little deeper, Gomez has a tendency to get pushed back a little bit. And so it's almost like they have a third center back, and that can create some sort of choppy possession moments for them. It's almost like what happened to Dax McCarty against Panama in the Gold Cup, right?
I see, yeah.
And I think Beloy is still very dominant in the air and still pretty technically sound. Torres is the one who concerns me a little, and who I think the U.S.
Concerns you in a good way? Like concerns you if you were Panamanian? Yeah.
Yeah, he would concern. Right, if I were a Canalateros supporter, I would imagine. I think Torres is a guy that the U.S. can attack and exploit. I just think he's just a step or two slower than he was before, and he was a guy. Do you think
Seattle fans would agree with you on that?
I think they might. It would be interesting to know what they think of him as an emergency defender, because that kind of used to be a strength. And
right.
What I mean is, like the moment that Gonzalez had in Honduras is emergency defense, right? And it's something that Omar's usually really good at, and there was really bad at. But I'm picking on Omar a lot today, but it's easy as of late.
Right.
That's not really something Torres is comfortable doing anymore. But what's bad about it is, like, if you watch him play in qualifying, he gets out there, like, he'll come out of his shape a little bit in a way where he's like, I'm going to step to this ball. And then he'll be like, oh, no, here I am in a position where I'm not sure I should have come out to because I don't have the pace to step to this ball now. And now I'm caught in no man's land. So I think he's become a little more indecisive, and I think that's something that the U.S. can take advantage of if they play with enough tempo.
That's interesting. That sounds like kind of a Jermaine Jones thing where, like, you used to be able to get there and now suddenly you can't, and now you're not quite sure what to do.
I think it's a lot like that. I think that's a good comparison.
So based on what you just said, then I would be thinking the US would be wise not to go out there and say, we're going to get a load of crosses into the box and we're going to beat Torres and Beloy in the air. They'd be wiser to say, let's get this ball on the floor and try and move it through that defense quickly.
Yeah, so the U.S. pumped 17 crosses into the box in the Gold Cup match. We all know how that worked out, and that team didn't have Beloy.
Right.
So that's what they want us to do, and they'll be really happy if the U.S. does that on Friday night.
So don't fall for it. Don't fall for it. What about fullbacks? I think last time we spoke, you mentioned Eric Davis. Yeah,
I like Eric Davis a lot. I think he should play at a better club.
Okay, yeah, he is. I'm looking at I've printed out the roster, and he is at Dunajska Streda, which I didn't click on the link to see where that is. Serbia, maybe, based on the flag?
Yeah. No, he's now moved overseas. He was a sensational player for their youth teams. And I'm mildly surprised that he's not, like, in a situation where, like Gabriel Torres is, where he's at a really good club in, say, like Switzerland.
Yeah.
Or just somewhere a little bit higher of a level. And the comparison I make that I think is reasonably fair, and now I want to give DeAndre Yedlin more credit. So I want to say Eric Davis is sort of like a poor man's DeAndre Yedlin.
And in Mirror World as well, right? Because he's a left back. But
right, in a mirror. He is very fast, and he's a little undersized, and he is kind of stronger than he looks, but he kind of lacks Yedlin's chops on the ball.
Yeah.
And, suffers from the same painful service issues that Yedlin has.
Okay, you mean like not crossing so well?
Right, like,
all right.
That was an interesting idea. It's not like Carlos Rivas where he's going to kick it into the Orlando City wall. But it's not good.
So this sounds like a job for Paul Arriola to me, given speed and strength.
Yeah, Paul Arriola is awesome. Have you seen the film? This is a shot in the dark. Have you seen the film Miracle?
I haven't.
Okay, so there's this scene in the movie. I'm just going to tell listeners anyway.
Yeah, go for it.
There's a scene in the film where Herb Brooks, who was the coach of the U.S. hockey team in 1980, has everybody skate suicide drills, and they skate them till they all start throwing up, and it's like, what is he making them do this for? And finally, like, they stop when Mike Eruzione, the captain of the team, screams, "My name's Mike Eruzione," and Herb Brooks says, "Who do you play for?" And he says, "Team USA." That's Paul Arriola. Like, he's the Mike Eruzione of U.S. soccer.
I love the idea of that comparison, despite having not seen Miracle. Also, you've definitely got me in trouble with listeners because there's already a mini campaign to get me to watch Mighty Ducks. So I feel like I'm going to end up watching all kinds of hockey movies in the near future.
Well, I think that the Mighty Ducks campaign is a winner, and all you need to know about Paul Arriola is my sense is that he would like that. Yeah, I mean, I feel like he would just run until he fell over.
Yeah. Or threw up.
Yeah, and so he's a guy that. The other thing is, I really want to see him play, not at Azteca, with DeAndre Yedlin behind him.
Yeah.
Just because I felt like one thing that happened at the Gold Cup, and this is a point that I think Taylor made, was that he was limited in some of the great things he can do as kind of a chance creator because he got pushed back based on where Zusi was.
Yeah, he was kind of helping out a lot, which is admirable, but also, didn't allow him to get forward as much as we would have liked.
Right, like it's so Paul Arriola to be helping out that much.
Yeah.
But at the same time, because Arriola's not a tremendous crosser of the ball, you need him to be getting forward and applying pressure on the opposing fullbacks. And I think that he can do that with Yedlin there. And the other thing about Arriola that, I've disagreed with some writers about is I'm not sure that there's much more of an attacking upside there. Like, I don't see that at all. I think, to me, I see a 22-year-old who is almost in a perfect position a bunch of times.
Right.
and so, I think you can grow into that. Bobby Wood did.
Yeah.
Right? And that was the big issue with Wood early in his national team career, was like, he got to the ball against Ecuador in the Landon Donovan send-off game, like 4 or 5 seconds, not even that long, too late, and it was offside, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Arriola can grow into that, and the more he plays, the more likely that is to happen. But in terms of playing against Panama, I think that he's definitely a guy you want.
Do you think we forget that he's only 22? Because I know I do sometimes, because I think we've just heard about him for so long that we forget he's still a young player, still learning his craft in many ways.
Yeah, I think we do forget it. I was disappointed that he came back to MLS.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I don't like MLS and not because I want DC United fans to be miserable, but because I thought that, there were other places that he could have gone given the obvious effort that he has, that he puts in, and the speed that he has. And, I do think that we forget that he's such a young player, because he's also a guy that's kind of defied expectation just pretty consistently. I don't think at the U20 World Cup he was expected to be one of the best players that the U.S. had, and he was.
Yeah.
So, I think he's improving, and while he has some weaknesses, I think that he's a guy that really adds a lot of value.
So my guess is that he thought, if I come back to Major League Soccer, I'll be sort of more visible as we run up to the 2018 World Cup. And then maybe good performances in MLS and in the World Cup might mean a move to Europe, in late 2018, early 2019.
Yeah, I thought so too. I think that's probably exactly what the thought process was, which is why he came back to DC as opposed to, going elsewhere.
Yeah. So I know we've run a little long here, Neil. Are you still good for time?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Okay, the final thing I want to talk about then, since we've done pretty much every position, is right back. Who will play right back for this Panama team? I've penciled in Michael Murillo here, but I think I might be missing someone. Do you know who the regular right back is?
They have played with Murillo. They have swung Fidel Escobar, who's with the Red Bulls.
Yeah, so far all Red Bulls so far at right back.
Yeah, Murillo's with he's with NYCFC, right?
No, he's with the Red Bulls definitely, because I remember him losing Latif Blessing in the Open Cup final.
Then you're right. Okay, so yes, they've kind of mixed and matched with those two guys.
So those the two.
Murillo is a guy that the U.S. can attack as well and exploit. I honestly think that to some extent, now, and I thought this against Honduras too, and ended up just being wrong. I thought that Honduras' fullbacks and Panama's fullbacks are arguments almost for playing Pulisic out wide, because those players just aren't going to be able to handle him 1v1.
Yeah.
But I don't know what to make of that.
I think the thing I came down on in the end is, if you're just going to foul him, which is kind of what happened in the last couple of games, right? If you're just going to foul Pulisic, then it's not a bad thing from an opposition standpoint to just foul him out on the wing and let the US have a free kick out wide and let Pulisic be kind of like, oh, that hurt, and hobble a little bit more. So maybe it just becomes too easy of a problem to solve for Honduras and Costa Rica, and maybe for Panama if you put him out wide, because it's a very obvious, cynical but obvious solution. Whereas if you put him through the middle, it's tougher.
Yeah, no, I think
because the free kicks are in tough spots, right?
Absolutely, and you know, the other thing is that, right? I mean, he just sees more of the ball. I mean, the U.S. It's not even so much that he sees more of the ball because the U.S. made a concerted effort to get him the ball, perhaps even too much, against Honduras. I thought, but it's that where he's getting the ball, there's more help near him, I think, when he's central.
True. Yeah.
So that's what I was kind of hinting at earlier when I think some of the deal with Pulisic isn't so much is he central, is he wide? Is who in the puzzle that the U.S. has around him can peel a defender away? Who makes the secondary run that concerns someone?
I mean, I'd argue Nagbe and Areola maybe could be guys doing it, and then Josie Altidore ahead of him, and I could see all of that stuff working. But I'm also also naturally an optimist, so.
No, I could too, and that was one of the reasons I thought, I still felt Fabian Johnson had value, right? Like I felt like if there's a guy that could bring out what Johnson does really well, which is play that first pass and then try to bust through towards the goal a lot. The goal he scored against Turkey in the send-off series before the last World Cup,
yes,
where he plays that ball to Bradley, and then Bradley chips it over, and Johnson had immediately darted off on that seam-busting run, and there he had the ball at goal.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of quick-hitting stuff is what he wants to do. He's not as interested in searching and figuring out triangles, and I think Pulisic is a player that can do that with him because he's used to playing with people like that. But, obviously that doesn't matter now. So
no, not this time around.
Who is it that makes it? I think you're right. I think it's Darlington Nagbe, but that's what I want to see from him. I want to see that decisiveness.
So, all right, final question then. How are you feeling about Friday? Just on a gut level, because I feel like we've got kind of analytical here, and I'm looking forward to reading. I'm looking forward to reading the preview, which I'm assuming will publish in the next 24 hours or so. But just on a sort of a gut Neil Blackmon level, going into Friday, what are you feeling?
I think, and I've been sticking with the theory that the U.S. will need a playoff to go to the World Cup.
Oof.
I don't think that results in. I don't think Bruce Arena should be fired or anything ridiculous if that happens. But here's how I'll frame it. In order to qualify automatically for the World Cup, the U.S. will have to do what they have not done in the Hex, which is win consecutive games. In every cycle, 2002, 2006, 2010, 2014, this century, the U.S. have won consecutive game in each hex. Now, they finished third, and then in 2002, and then first in every hex after that.
Right.
And I think they went 5 unbeaten under Klinsmann in 2014. There hasn't been any of that here, although they did go 4 unbeaten at the beginning of the Arena tenure.
Mm-hmm.
They just didn't. But even doing that, Daryl, they didn't reel off. Yeah, they did not reel off back-to-back victories.
Was it win at home, tie away, win at home, tie away?
Right. So we have no precedent for them doing what they need to do to qualify automatically for the World Cup. Panama have conceded 5 times, and I think it's going to be tough. But as the game has drawn closer, I've grown just more comfortable in the U.S. kind of clawing and scratching it out. So give me a 1-0 on Josie Altidore goal.
Yeah, all right, I'll take that right now. And then I felt weirdly we haven't talked about Trinidad at all. And it really is like everyone's so focused on Panama that maybe Saturday morning / afternoon we'll start thinking about that trip to Trinidad and what happens there. And it's also, my understanding is a situation where we don't really know the mathematical qualification situation until we go into that game. And it's almost too hard to figure out the multiple variables until we're down to the final game.
We really won't, and we know the deal with them. I mean, the main thing with Trinidad is you just can't let Kevin Molino get loose on you, and it's really not much more complicated than that. And the U.S. did a really, really nice job on him in the home qualifier. I
think we'll be talking about Levi Garcia in a few days' time because I think they've called him up. He's the guy that plays for AZ.
Yeah. He's a nice little player.
Yeah. But is he a nice little player when he's going up against US fullbacks? We might not like him so much then.
No.
All right, Neil, on that note, I want to say thank you for the generous amount of time. I hope you don't bill hourly. If so, I'm not going to give you the address to send the invoice. But yeah, thanks for taking the time. I'll put a link to yanksarcoming.com in the show notes so people can find it and go read your preview. I assume it's half you and half John. Is that still how you guys do it?
Yeah, John is going to do the Panama player to watch and the what to expect from the U.S. sections like he usually does.
Okay, great. I really do look forward to reading it.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you.